Hey guys, this is Patrick Freeman here in Chongqing, China. Today is February 23rd. Today I am going to have a conversation about the most politically incorrect subject that has probably been discussed out there. And it's because I'm going to be talking about the most politically incorrect individual that ever lived. And I'm going to talk about Jesus Christ. Now, hold on, agnostic, hold on, atheist, hold on, people who don't believe in Christianity. If you would just do me a huge favor, and this is from the heart, just listen to what I have to say. And if you don't like what I have to say, if you don't believe it, then go find another channel to hang out at, or unsubscribe, or do whatever. And that's okay if you do that. I mean, that's your prerogative. But I want you to listen to me, because this is from the heart, and this is from an individual that has had an amazing experience with God. And I'm here to tell you that God is real, and that God is faithful, and that He does exist. And I'll share with you my testimony, and I'll try to give you a Cliff Notes version of it. There's a time in my life where I was making $250, close to $300,000 a year. I had the big house, 4,000 square foot house. I had the Audi. I had all the nice cars. Had a bank account full of money. And during this period of my life, the more money that I made, the more miserable I got. I was struggling with alcohol at the time, and then at one point started to do Vicodin and alcohol. And I was really being convicted during this period, because what could have probably happened is I could have died in a car wreck. And I had visions of me drinking and driving and being in a car wreck and getting killed. So I was really, like I said, I was being convicted and drawn to Him. And, I had grown up as a Christian. I had gone to church pretty much every Sunday from when I was a kid all the way to high school. After that, after college, went occasionally. Got married after college, went occasionally, but just never really made God a priority in my life. I had other things that I wanted to do. I wanted to make money. I wanted to be successful. As I got older, just my life got more and more miserable. I had all these things, and I was miserable. And, one of the things, too, that, and I'll explain how this problem was solved, but I used to wake up probably 2 or 3 times a week, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was in these cold sweats where, I would think to myself, if I died right now at this moment, where would I go? And I had no clue. And I had grown up in a Christian church, and I thought I was supposed to know this, but I didn't feel it inside. I didn't feel a connection to God. So back in 2002, 2003, I was married then. My wife had gone to visit some friends, and so I was by myself. And occasionally I'd like to go to this church. It's called Second Baptist in Houston, a big, massive church, several campuses. I really liked the pastor, Ed Young. Well, I went there, this one day by myself. And I remember sitting in the car thinking to myself, and actually I said a prayer, and I said, God, I want something to change today. I want my life to change today. I want to know who You are. And, it was a very short prayer, not eventful, didn't think anything about it, went inside. And this auditorium was huge. It was probably held 2,000 or 3,000 people, sat in the very back. And Ben Young was actually preaching that day, who is Ed Young's son. And I remember the title of the sermon. It was called, "Are You Fig Leafing It?" And, it's basically about our works are never sufficient enough to get us into heaven and to have a relationship with God. And he had this great analogy that he was talking about. And I had heard it before, but it didn't hit me like it did this particular day, where he says, it's like he's saying to the people in the crowd, he says, imagine if you died today, and you're standing before God, and God says, why should I let you in? And in a moment, an instant, a second, a millisecond, God gives you the ability to share every single good deed that you had performed in your life. And you take this, he used the analogy of a plate of righteousness. You take this plate of righteousness and you place it before God, and you said, these are all the things that I have done, and this is why you should accept me. And he said, God's going to say, not good enough. And he's going to push the plate aside. And I remember when he said that, I was dumbfounded. I was scared, and I thought to myself, okay, if I'm not a murderer. I haven't done anything really bad. I'm a decent guy. Why wouldn't God accept me based on some of the things that I've done? He goes on in this analogy where he says, God's going to push that aside, your plate of righteousness, and he's going to pull up his son's plate of righteousness. And he's going to say, look, my son, I sent my son to the earth for a reason. Sin separates you from God. You have to be 100% righteous. You have to be 100% perfect to be able to stand in front of God and have a relationship with God. I sent my son, number one, to live the life that you could never live. He lived a perfect life. He never sinned in thought or deed. He taught all these wonderful truths of who he is, who we are. I'm talking about the Trinity. And he performed all these miracles to prove the authority that he had and who he is. And then he died on the cross because there needs to be punishment for sin. There needs to be justification for sin. And that's what Jesus came to do, is to die on the cross so that I could reestablish the relationship between man and God. Ben goes on, and he said this like 20 times, maybe 15 times, 10 or 15 times, but he says, you can never, ever, 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 ever be good enough to get into heaven on your own. And like I said, I was blown away. I felt helpless, and I was like, okay, what do I need to do? And he goes on and he talks about Paul, who his original name was Saul, but was renamed Paul. He wrote about 2/3 of the New Testament. And he said, Paul, in like Philippians 3, Paul talked about himself. And Paul was basically the poster child of the community leader. First of all, he was a Pharisee. He came from a lineage of Pharisees. He came from the right tribe. He did everything that he was supposed to. He obeyed the law, everything that he was supposed to. And what Paul realized is all those things, all that righteousness that he had acquired and built up to, he realized that it was essentially scubala. And scubala is, I believe it's the Aramaic word for crap, camel crap. And he realized that his works was not good enough, that he could not create a righteousness based on his behavior, based on all his good deeds, that God would accept him. He said it was a righteousness from God. We can't build up a righteousness, like a critical mass of righteousness where God accepts us based on the things that we do. And that's what Paul realizes, that it's a righteousness from God. And that righteousness is Jesus and the finished work and the things that he did on earth to prove who he was, and also to bridge that gap that's been between man and God since the fall of Adam and Eve. And that's a whole nother subject that I may talk about, but for right now, I think you get my point. And it was in that service that I began to realize I'm never going to be able to do enough good deeds. I could be a Mother Teresa on steroids and still never be accepted by God based on all the good things that I've done in my life, that I have to depend on Jesus. And there was a sense of relief in that service. I don't remember exactly when, but there was a sense of relief. It wasn't about what I did. It was about accepting what he did. Now, at the end of the sermon, they had an altar call, and I felt this pull. And I don't know how to explain it, but there was this pull that I didn't go down. But that night when I was home by myself, I was listening to, and I know a lot of Christians will remember this, but there was a series of, or kind of a compilation of different Christian songs put into what they called wow worship. And I really felt it was anointed. But I had been listening to that for probably 6 months before this event. And I was listening to that same CD at night, and I felt led to get on my knees, and I got on my knees, and I was crying, and I was just pouring my heart out to God. And I said, I've got all this stuff. I've got this huge house. I've got all this money. I've got all these cars, but I am miserable. I grew up in church, God, and I feel like I don't know you. I don't feel a connection. I don't know how I can have a relationship with a God that I can't even see. And another thing that I poured out to him was my fear of death. And for several years, maybe a decade, I would wake up 2 or 3 times during the week, about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I would just have this deep sense of fear, almost like a cold sweat fear of, if I died at this moment, I have no clue as to where I'm going. And I brought that before God, and I said, I'm afraid of dying. I don't know where I'm going if I die. And Jesus, if you're real, if you're, all these pastors and preachers tell me that I need to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I don't know how I can do that with somebody I can't see, but if you are real, I want you. And it was at that moment that I felt the presence of God come in that room like I had never felt before. And I was bawling, I was crying, not because I was afraid. It's because I felt his presence. I felt a love that I had never felt. And it was almost a tangible love that changed my heart. And it was from that point that I realized, obviously looking back, and even at that moment, I realized that I had come into a relationship with Jesus Christ. I had come into a relationship with God through Jesus Christ and his finished work. And it's been an amazing experience ever since then. I'm going to leave it at that because I want to talk. I do want to share actually some more things that happened afterwards. And I'm actually the prodigal son. I came to know Jesus and was radically changed, and then went through some really difficult times and kind of walked away from God for a long time. Again, I'll save that for another video. But the reason why I talk about him today, and the reason why I share my testimony with you today, is you look at what's going on this planet, and we are experiencing things that are unprecedented. This virus is all over the world, not in every single country, but 30 to 35 countries, and it just almost seems like it's unstoppable. It's very virulent. The locust that I mentioned yesterday in my video, the locust coming up from Africa and possibly maybe coming into China, the earthquakes. There's earthquakes, unusual earthquake activity happening. And the other thing that's happening too is, Scripture talks about what used to be considered truth is going to be considered lies, and what's considered lies is going to be considered truth. And you see that. You see that on the internet. You see that on social platforms. You see it within political parties where they present an idea where 10, 15 years ago we would have gone, no, that's not correct. That's wrong. And today we're accepting lies as truth. Scripture talks about these things happening on this planet before Christ's return. Now, I don't know if Christ is coming in the next 10 minutes. I don't know if he's coming in the next year or the next 5 years or 10 years, but it appears that we are getting very close to his return. I've seen one video after another of people having dreams and visions of Jesus and his return, having these rapture dreams where, the Christian body is taken home, and then the 7 years of tribulation happens afterwards. First time that I've been seeing stuff like this on YouTube ever. And it talks about he will give dreams and visions to people, and we're starting to see that. Again, I don't know if it's going to happen in the next 5 years or 10 years, but what I do know is I'm 50, and if I live to, let's say you're 50 and you live to age 75 or age 80, we don't have that much more time. I look back and see how much time has flown by, and it's flown by. And I say this because this morning I saw some news about a friend who passed away from a massive heart attack within the past couple of days. We were actually roommates in college for about a year, and we're friends. After college, we kind of fell out of touch, but it really struck me that whether Jesus Christ returns today or 30 years from now, we don't have a lot of time, and we don't know our time. It could be tomorrow that you die. It could be tomorrow that I die. But the point is, if you are afraid of where you're going, if you don't know where you're going and you want that, I just invite you to ask Jesus into your life. And I know it sounds so Christianese, but we do need to recognize our separation. We do need to recognize the sin in our life, and that separates us from God. But what I believe at even a deeper level is it's a heart issue. When we recognize that we need him and we ask him into our lives, it's almost like it goes from the head to the heart, and he sees that. And Jesus doesn't want your performance. He wants your heart. And when you give him your heart, then he'll give you the performance. I'm going to leave it at that. And I just invite you, after this, ask him into your life, because he is real, and he will radically change the way that you feel and the way that you perceive the things going on today. Instead of being fearful, there will be a sense of peace, like I'm experiencing right now. In the middle of all this, I'm experiencing peace. I want you to experience that, and I just challenge you to pour your heart out to him and seek him, because he'll open the door, just like that door behind me. He's knocking on it, and all you have to do is open it, and he'll come in. And he'll feast with you like you would not believe. I'm leaving it at that, guys. I love you, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.